Welcome everybody to the Impact Toolkits program. This is going to be 9 workshops. This is number 8. We are the penultimate. Say, Mark, we're saving the best till almost last. And if you've missed any of these sessions, they are all on the Aspect program platform, which we'll share with you. 9 1-hour workshops. We've talked about Canva. We've talked about infographics, building a website, the power of your phone to make videos and do photography. We talked about tools for the job. Last week was quite an intense one, talking about project management tools and a bit on AI. The whole purpose of this pilot program, this is a pilot program, this is a test. We've chosen these topics based upon feedback, and we're getting more feedback on what we might include if we're able to run another series. And it's all for you to understand what tools are available for you to help you build your toolkit. We had quite a debate in the first one about what a toolkit is, but we're looking at creative ways to start new conversations, to share your research, to enhance your project. It has a different meaning to most of you, and that's absolutely fine. We're not here to kind of judge that. We've also had some great toolkit examples, and we're going to have an amazing one on the podcasting session next week. And it's to create inspiration, ideas, make things feel less daunting. Because you do look at tech. I mean, websites for me especially. I remember when websites were like a dark art, and people, it was like going to a car showroom. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And now we can all pretty much build a website in 10 minutes using some tool. It's all there to be done. So if we empower you to move your project forward, then I think that we have succeeded. So it's all being recorded, so you'll be able to watch this back. There's going to be additional resources on there. I'm making notes while Mark talks and sending other links with some of the tools that we talked about with George. And the websites like Figma. There's little 1-minute intros to those tools for us. There's lots of resources there and conversations going on, which is really lovely. And we want to hear from you about what you're doing and what you'd like to see in the future. That's me, Lucy Payne. That's my house rabbit. She's next door asleep. It's a bit hot to have a fur coat today. I work for TechSpark, which is Bristol Bath Tech Community. I'm also entrepreneur resident at the University of Bath. I used to work at Sussex Innovation Centre for 5 years. I've helped a lot of people on the journey of their venture, their project, whether it's commercial or not. I think the journey is very similar, and I'm just your host. I get to listen to all these amazing people. Today, you know what we're talking about today. Just wanted to give you a big heads up that next week is making podcasts. So if that isn't in your diary, that's going to be the last one for today. And I am now going to make sure you have that link so I'm pausing on this link before I hand over to Mark. Okay, make sure you've got that. And I'm going to hand over Mark now to talk about low code and no code. So coding is daunting. I can't code. I've worked in tech for 30 years, and I have never, ever got my head around a line of code. And I'm quite proud of that, really. Mark, are you with us?
Yes, I'm just.
Oh, so is your tech now being grumpy? Brilliant.
There we go.
I can see that perfectly. Yeah.
You can see that. Great.
And I was going to say on housekeeping, do put your questions in the Q&A. We have the chat disabled just because we're recording this, but do ask questions. And what we'll do is between Mark and I, we'll keep an eye on those as he's talking, and we'll answer them as we get them. One of my favorite things about doing online events is we don't have to wait until the end when questions suddenly have lost their relevance. So do ask them in the moment. You've all been brilliant at doing that through this series. So please keep on engaging.
Okay, I shall kick off.
Brilliant.
Thank you for that, Lucy. My name's Mark Corderoy. I'm entrepreneur in residence at the University of West of England, where I run one of their incubators. I've been really involved in startups for all of my career, and you'll see how far that goes back on one of the slides in a minute. One of the things I'm sort of passionate about is widening access of these brilliant technology tools that we have to more than people who just study technology. You don't just have to study technology to have good ideas. And this low code technique of developing programs is something that has been an ongoing journey for me. And as I say to new entrepreneurs I work with, I genuinely believe now is probably the most exciting time to be an entrepreneur. The tools that you have available, what you can do with very limited resources, it's never been a richer landscape. So what I want to do is this presentation is split into 3 parts. The first part is just a little bit of background introduction to the area of low code. The scary bit is the middle bit where I try to do some live demos, and then I've got a short few slides at the end to give you an example of a company that we're working with where the founders are completely non-technical, who are actually in the process. Well, they launched a product a couple of weeks ago and they're actively fundraising, and proof of the pudding, to be honest. So we all live in a digital age. Our phone is probably the first thing we touch in the morning. The average person probably checks their phone 50, 60 times a day. Many people, be in excess of 3 hours on their phone. And again, the phone is the last thing that you'll probably touch, when you set your alarm for the morning. In our working hours, we're surrounded by tech. We're surrounded by dashboards. We're surrounded by apps. We're surrounded by tools. And what we've been trying to work out is how we can build a sort of a model of how ordinary people, non-technical people, can participate in this sort of communication space. How can people create apps that they need, or their colleagues need, or the job functions they're responsible for need? And so we have this sort of basic model of how apps and the internet work. And it's sort of helped us sort of work out what tools do different teams need to build the apps they need. And I think I should point out at this point, we're talking about web apps and mobile apps distinct from websites. You've already had a session on websites, I understand, but web apps and mobile apps tend to be far more interactive, far more data intensive, far more targeted to the individual user. When you go onto your HR web app, it's only your information you're seeing, not your colleague's information. And so there tends to be the need for a lot more data services, automation and information services that are sorting out all the things you need, from bookings to and availability to routing or to image manipulation or the growing area of AI. So we tend to talk about the idea of having to create mobile apps, web apps, tablet apps, sort of things that you'd see on the dashboard of vehicles. But these are all examples of apps, interactive apps that connect to the internet. And it's in the internet that you store all the data, you share data, that you maintain all those complex information relationships that you might need. It's where you can access lots of other services. So you might want to access third-party products. You might want to access tools that can help you automate. You've got tools like make.com and Zapier that can help you integrate with other services. And so this becomes our generic model. And the problem with this generic model has been that development is expensive. There is no getting away from it, that until very, very recently, the UK market rate for a full stack developer is about £500 a day. So even the shortest project, a 3-month project, you're needing a budget of £30,000. And that puts development outside the reach of most people. And it's no coincidence that most startups have a tech lead somewhere in their founding team. And if you're from a non-technical discipline, it creates a real problem. And we've been asking for a long time, what would the world be like if we didn't need developers? And if we didn't need developers, potentially we're in a situation where anyone can create an app. And when you empower people to create apps and create web apps, suddenly you're putting, you're changing the balance of expertise. Subject matter experts who are experts in whatever domain they're experts in. It could be psychology, it could be history, whatever. They are able to use the digital technology to communicate with whatever stakeholders are relevant. And this is really what low-code development is all about. And unfortunately, the sort of technology and internet is very good at this. A lot of low code terminology has been hijacked by technical marketers, but to try and come up with a basic definition of what do I mean by low code development, at the heart of it is you want to develop applications with a minimum of hand coding, writing code. Sometimes you see people talk about low code and no code. I try not to use the word no code because I don't really think it's possible. We all are used to some form of coding, even if it's just sometimes typing a formula into a spreadsheet or something like that. But we like to think in terms of low code. And at the core of low code is this idea of point and click visual development tools that you paint with a palette of objects that give you the functionality that you're looking for. If you're comparing a low code environment to a non-low code environment, there's lots of job functions like UI designers and UX designers. A good low code environment should actually remove the need for a lot of these extra people. That the idea of having good quality templates and components should get your application started very quickly, and probably, and I'm just speaking personally here, certainly punch above your own weight when it comes to the quality of the interfaces that you can create. Flow diagrams or declarative logic is far more relevant and understandable than code. We all understand what a flow diagram is. Box 1 goes to box 2, goes to box 3. That's how, where you do have to embed sort of process logic in a low-code environment, that's how we want to do it, and I'll be showing some examples of that. And then the ability to integrate with third-party systems is so important. The web has provided such a rich range of information services. The ability to link up your product with someone else's service can transform the speed at which you can go to market, the quality of the information that you can provide, the richness of the service you can provide. And so any low-code environment has to play nicely on the internet, and it has to be able to connect widely. So, as I said, I've been trying to work out how to do this low-code stuff for a long time now. And I should point out, I'm not a software person. I'm a mechanical engineer by background. And my first experience of low-code was actually in 1991. First company I set up was in 1991. We were using a product called Visual Basic. And you can see how it had a little palette of tools that you could use, and you had a form surface where you could build applications. It was very basic, and we all thought it was brilliant at the time. But something else happened in 1991, which actually was far more transformative than the first sort of low-code program. 1991 was the birth of the internet. And if you look at what's happened over the last 33 years on the internet, there is definitely a pattern as to how long it's taken to solve this low-code problem. The first sort of 10 years of the internet, it was the Wild West. People were inventing things left, right, and center. No one knew how to use this thing called the internet. And lots of services were sort of created very, very embryonic. The 10 years that followed that, we had this new type of business coming on the internet, creating infrastructure or infrastructure services. You might have heard of things like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. These are all services that have been created to mean that people like me, who aren't deep tech people, can forget about computers and racks, and the idea of having unlimited storage or unlimited computing power has been solved by these people. The next phase of the development of the internet was the creation of platforms that sat on top of that infrastructure. And these platforms did things like it provided databases, it provided coding environments. Some of the early AI sit within this platform services layer. And where we are now, it is widely recognized the most effective way of delivering software services is as a service, downloading your products from the internet or running it in your browser or downloading it to your phone. And it is these platform services that have been created that now allow us to create these software products, web apps, as non-technical people. So the internet very much has sort of eventually adopted standards, which means that whether you're running a mobile app or you're running a web app, you can connect to different services using, you might have heard the phrase API, application programming interfaces. It's a bit of jargon, which is a standard way of just as a URL to a website is a standard way of connecting to websites. An API is just a standard way of connecting to a data service. The only difference is it can carry a little bit of information in the API, and that can tell the data service what you want something to happen. So we've now been sort of tracking this space, and we've been looking at lots of different tools that are or could be used to create the web apps and the mobile apps that our sort of customers and our partners are building. And you can start to see that there are different types of services sitting in the cloud, from artificial intelligence to cloud automations, database services, notification and communication services. All of these can be connected via APIs to coding environments that let you build your web apps and your mobile apps. And the key to the low code environments that we're working on is this sort of triangle of applications where we have a cloud automation service called BuildShip, Superbase, which is a database, and Flutterflow, which is your development environment. And that simplified model provides almost as much programming capability, whether you want to create a very simple little program or a very complicated program. We're able to develop those programs once you've sort of worked out how these three tools work. So if we look at some of the benefits of, why would you want to do low code programming? The simple answer is a lot of it's down to speed and investment. We talk about programs being written in weeks rather than months now. Accessibility, enabling non-developers to create apps without the need for tech partners, tech members of their team. The apps themselves are just more cost effective. They're cheaper to create. The most expensive part of creating most apps is actually the staff labor in the coding time. And I think one of the more exciting areas is low code encourages innovation. It enables people who haven't traditionally had access to creating these types of products to steer the direction of a product, create a new product, or be part of a team that is creating a product. And if you look into the application, into the academic area, suddenly you can start to think about apps that can be aligned with research programs, enhancing data collection analysis, broadening participation. I've come across people who are using apps to record stories and transcribe those stories into databases, and broad participation of people, which probably hasn't been doable or affordable within the normal academic way of working. The ability to have real-time connections to people, subjects, objects out in the field remotely is possible. And the ability to just have a research team research participation. Virtually everyone has smartphones in their pockets. They are all potential targets for you to work with. And because you can bring the development of these tools in-house, it does become more cost effective. You're not tied into long-term expensive relationships with third-party developers. And it will become a core part of almost sort of any team, I think, going forwards, in the same way that 20 years ago, if you wanted a PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet written, you'd write notes down and someone would produce a PowerPoint or someone would produce a spreadsheet for you. We've now do that ourselves. I think what will happen, more and more people will start to use these types of tools to create communication channels, data collection tools for themselves and their own organizations. So I just want to, before the demo, I just want to show you or introduce to you the three main tools that we spend a lot of time working with people wanting to create their apps. And explain why these three tools form such a powerful toolkit. It's always good practice to try and separate out different aspects of your application. The user interface, the way someone interacts with their phone, is one aspect of that. How do I present data? How do I interact with data? So that's where we use Flutterflow to develop our user interface. We store all data in a database called Superbase. And that means that once the data store is created, we know that that works, and you can change the interface without damaging the data store. And that sort of, there's an integrity between what happens on the interface of a device like your phone and the data that you're trying to store. And similarly, your cloud services are the if you like, the background logic that your application may or may not need to have. So if you're booking a place at an event, you will use your interface with Flutterflow to fill out your details in a booking form. You'll send that data off to be stored in Superbase. You'll press the buy now button to pay for your place, and the cloud services will basically be sitting there waiting to be told by the payment provider that you're using. Payment has gone through. You can now send out the welcome pack to that delegate or whatever. So you're separating logic in the cloud, storage in databases from the user experience of how someone interacts with your app. So Flutterflow is a very powerful product developed by two engineers who left Google to create Flutterflow. One of the things that makes Flutterflow so powerful is that it is one development environment that lets you build apps for Android phones, apps for iPhones, and apps for the web. And so you no longer have to have different teams developing different apps for different platforms. And that in itself is a huge time and cost saving. The other thing that's important about Flutterflow is, without wanting to get too techie, there are different ways programs work. Some programs are called interpreted programs, and that means that when you run that program, some other program is working out what you're trying to do, and it will deliver that function for you. Other types of programs are compiled into what's called native languages, and they tend to be far more robust and far faster. And that's what Flutterflow does. It builds on Google's own language called Dart, and that means it gives us a very, very robust platform to produce fast applications that can be run on all the important platforms that we need to worry about. It is very good at providing help, providing templates, providing examples. Here we can see there's content here for lists and e-commerce, so you can work on templates, and instead of you having to start from that sort of blank sheet of paper every time you want to develop something, it does that for you. And the environment itself is drag and drop. You've got toolkits on the left-hand side, and we'll see these in the demo later. We have sort of properties and settings on the right-hand side, and you visually build the app that you want to create. And an app is basically made up of lots of pages. Each page is made up of elements that we call widgets. And widgets are just things that do something, like a button or a list or a checkbox, or a photograph or something like that. And each of those pages links to other pages, or it links to background information services and sources like databases and web services. And what we've been developing is this, and I'm not going to go into detail, but we've been developing this sort of layered approach to how you develop these applications now. So how do you build your widgets and create your interfaces? How you set actions? What happens when you click on something? How do you make something look different? What are the properties of these widgets? Where do you store information? Do you store information on the page or within the app? Or do you store data in a database? And what we have now is a sort of a 3 or 4 step program that basically says, once you understand how you store information, once you understand what a widget is, once you understand how to lay widgets out, you're getting way down the path to being able to build your own applications. Everything is actually a widget in the world of apps, and here we can see a chat type app with a set of the widgets that Supabase provide. I think Supabase has about over 85 different widgets, but we can see that there is an image widget showing the thumbnail of a person. There's a text widget showing the name of a person. These widgets are all sitting inside something called a list view, and that's just a scrollable panel where you can have lots of bits of information. A button is a widget, and as I say, what you learn to do with when you start to work with Flutterflow is you start learning what are the basic widgets. How do I lay things out in rows and columns? How do I space things out? How do I get my basic functionality like a button or a picture? And over time, you just start to experiment and work out, oh, there's a better widget for doing something, and you just your toolkit. It's like if when you when you first have a house, you'll buy a toolkit of things to keep the house together, and as you go through the years, you'll add more and more tools to that toolkit, and developing apps very similar to that. So the widgets that you put down on a page are how they look are determined by properties. We're all used to properties. When you go into Word and you highlight a word and hit the bold button, you're changing the properties of that word. Well, this just sort of extracts those properties and gives you a lot more control over things. So you can control things like how much space is around something, the padding, are corners rounded, what color do you want something to be, what font is something going to be in. Lots of different properties to control how a widget sits on a page and how it sits alongside and reacts with the other widgets on that page. And so the starting point for all this sort of type of development is working out how to build pages and visually get the pages you want to happen in your app. And obviously that's where templates help, because templates give you pre-packaged sets of widgets already laid out for you, so you can see how someone else has made something work, and then you can just sort of modify something if you need to. Once you have your page and your widgets set up, you then start to add the interactivity, and this is where we have these sort of flow diagrams of actions. So when I click on a button, or I double click on a button, or when a page loads, or when a timer is triggered, you can set up process flows that will tell the application to do things. It might tell an application to navigate to a different page. It may write some data to a database, or it might change the value of data stored on the page. It might give you access to a microphone or a camera. There are, again, dozens and dozens of different actions, and when you're starting out with Flutterflow, you learn what are the basics, like how to navigate, and you can just develop a sort of an arsenal of different actions that you can create for your application. So that's an introduction to Flutterflow. The next important element are databases. We use a product called Superbase. I should have said right from the start that all the products I'm talking about here have a free tier. You can build applications in Flutterflow without having to spend any money at all. Superbase has a very generous free tier, as does BuildChip. But what Superbase lets you do is it lets you organize data. And I'm going to try and illustrate why that's so important. We're all used to spreadsheets. So, well, at least here, there's spreadsheets everywhere. Spreadsheets seem like a good idea sometimes for storing information. So maybe I've got a camping goods shop and I want to store all my orders and who I'm sending out, all the products people are buying. So if I was to use a spreadsheet, and people do, I would just start to add information into the spreadsheet every time I got a new order. And straight away, you start to see problems with this approach. We've got 3 orders from Harriet Turner, obviously very into her camping. Is this the same Harriet Turner, or have I got 2 different people called Harriet Turner? Because actually, there are actually 2 different addresses for this person. Has she moved, or is it 2 different people? A spreadsheet can very, very quickly get you into trouble with information repetition, the difficulty in managing information, particularly when your spreadsheets just get out of control and start to get very, very large very, very quickly. And so what a database does is it helps you organize data. So in this example here, we have data about the customer, we have data about product, and we have data about orders. And a database, and Superbase is really good at letting you do all this using point and click tools. A database allows you to create tables. They look like spreadsheets, but they have some special features. The most important one is every row in this table has its own unique ID. So we know that Harriet Turner is ID 1001. That number is generated by database, and it means that all the data that we store can be uniquely referenced. And it does this automatically. Every time I write a new customer into database, it will give me a new unique number. So if Harriet moves from 532 Parkinson Forges to Woodland Lodge, Snowdonia, I update that information in one place, and wherever Harriet appears in other parts of the system, that information is updated. The product database is, again, simple list of products with an ID for each product you have. So you now have unique IDs for every product. You can enhance that by adding things like stock and price, so you can start to be more flexible in how you start to use your database. And then finally, we have our orders. And we have an order number, which links our order number 2001, links customer 1001, which is Harriet, to the product they've bought, the quantity, the price, and the delivery address. And we can see down order number 2004. Again, it's Harriet, but this time it's to a different address. And so what a database lets you do is it's very good at getting a team together to sort of decide what data do we need to store and how do we store it to make sure that we have every bit of information is only stored in one place. We manage it in one place. And it sort of creates a discipline. Once you've created a good database, it's much, much easier to build the app that sits on top of that database. The final part of this picture then is BuildChip. BuildChip is a product that allows you to build what in the jargon is called back-end tasks. When you want to go and visit a website, you type in the URL of that website, and you know that you're going to be taken to either the home page or a page within that website. What BuildShip lets you do is it lets you create a URL that takes you to a process, something that will deliver information, logic, decision making on your behalf. So, for example, I might give a product ID to a back-end process and ask the back-end process to work out which store is that product in stock. Or I might pass up a photograph and ask an AI model to analyze that photograph and return to me the textual description of that photograph. And that's what BuildShip does. It's a process which is traditionally right at the heart of sort of the geek end of the development world. And what BuildShip has allowed to happen is you can now create process flows which have a trigger, have an entry point. That's the point at which you invoke a back-end process, you give it some data, and then you have nodes that do things. And these nodes can be a linear tree like this, but there's lots of nodes, and you can see here we have nodes that can loop and repeat and branch and switch and parallel process. We have nodes that can integrate with lots of different products like OpenAI, Superbase, email via something like Resend. So, for example, if I have a process that is triggered every time a new user signs up to your application, you can have a back-end process that sort of reads who the new user is, and depending upon what type of user there are, you send them a welcome email. Personalized welcome email with instructions as to how to maybe use the product or sign up for whatever you're trying to do.
Mark, not to break your flow, but I think Pyro's question is quite timely. The question is, if the app is simple enough in such a way that it doesn't require tons of data, could we go without Superbase, or is it a necessary item in the app developing?
That's yeah, no, the Superbase is an optional add-on to Flutterflow. Flutterflow can be used as a self-standing application. It does have some database support built into it. Use a Google product called Firebase. So if you have a simple app and you're just doing simple data gathering, you could do it all within Flutterflow, and the database side of things could be added on as and when it was needed.
It can evolve. That's really good, because that's a
Yeah,
key narrative of all of this. Is kind of start
yeah,
with the simples and things do
yeah, yeah.
connect and answer. And thank you very much. Sorry to ruin your flow there.
No, that's absolutely fine. So what we have here is a simple flow where something called an endpoint is defined, and you can pass that a piece of information. And in this example, we're passing that data into a pre-built node, which is a ChatGPT node. That node is asking a question. You can just see it's saying what is in this image, and we then just process the answer and say the answer we're going to call description, and then we'll return that answer to the app. So you can now have you'd have an endpoint where I could pass up a URL of any image, and this process flow would open up that image, analyze that image using AI, and then return to whichever application called that image. It would return that description so you could see what was in that image. And I think the reason we've sort of come up with, it's a bit like they say in cooking, different cooking have 3 key ingredients to define the style of a region or something like that. The reason we've looked at this idea of user interface development, database development, and cloud automation is because those are the 3 ingredients that can let you build huge number of different applications in different sorts of areas. I could be using BuildShip to work out the distance between or all people within 2 kilometers of Bristol city centre, by using Google APIs and things like that. So, but you don't have to use all this. And generally what people do is they find a little wedge. They need to solve one particular problem. So they'll use BuildShip to solve one problem and leave 95% of its functionality on the shelf until they come back another time to sort of delve a bit deeper and solve another problem. So what I'm going to try and do now is take my life in my own hands and just give you. Can you see that, Lucy?
I can see your butterfly. Yep.
Yep. Okay. What I'm going to just do is spend sort of 5 or 10 minutes just showing you the tools and hopefully just give you an insight into how accessible they are. When you have a Flutterflow account, this is your opening screen. This is all the projects that you are working on. You click on a project to load it up, and you'll see the screen that we had up earlier. And it looks quite complicated, but actually you have some basic navigation on the left-hand side that lets you see things like your widget tree on the left. You can see the pages you've created, and as I move between different pages and different components, you can see the widget tree below these components is changing. There are tools here for setting up database links. There are tools here for setting up links to your API calls. And again, you just learn the bits of them that you need as you develop your app. Adding pages. If I wanted to add a page, I can add a blank page and just do everything from scratch. Or I can say, well, I want to create a content page. I want to create sort of a bug report page. And the system will create a page for me within my application. And what's nice about this is it gives you a real good starting point with a tree already populated. So I can see where my text fields are, I can see where my columns are, and within a column I've got different text fields. Everything's basically laid out in rows and columns, and this is a good way of beginning to understand that. On the right, each time I click on one of these fields, I'm able to change the property. So if I want to go and change, I don't know, the font weight of my text, I can change my font weight. If I want to go and change the font size, I can do that. I can change the label. So and basically this is how I control my application. This is how I sort of lay out my application, and sort of get how do I want to communicate with my end user. When I'm happy with what I have here, I can then start looking at, when I click on this area, the screenshots, I can now say I want to create an action, and I want to add an action, and I want to maybe upload an image. And the system then basically asks me, where do I want to upload it to? So I want to upload it to Supabase, and I've already created a bucket called resources to put it in, and a folder called images. And if I was to now, if I just change my setup for a second. if I now go into the test mode, this does take a couple of minutes to set up. Just leave it running in the background. I have created a page in the matter of a few minutes, which I can upload an image and display that image on the interface.
I'm definitely going to have a play on these tools after this. This is what you've done. You sent me down a rabbit hole, Mark, which is obviously what these sessions are for. But
Yeah,
I didn't realize quite how intuitive it was. And looking at all the UX, it all feels very familiar. Feels a little bit like MailChimp UX or even like Wix Weebly. Everything
yeah,
looks very intuitive.
yeah,
Because I was still daunted about this. I've built websites. I love Canva. I'm not on commission, but I hadn't had a look at these tools
yeah.
before.
What I find exciting about these tools is, you know, you're building things that can sit in someone's pocket. That you know, the we're working with one council which wants to, for example, enable all their staff to take photographs of graffiti
Yeah.
and then use AI to analyze that graffiti to see if it's offensive. And if it's offensive in certain ways, is it close to a synagogue? If it's offensive, if it's
Oh,
anti-Semitic, if it's inappropriately next to a school, so they can actually, their cleaning teams can be sort of sent in real time.
prioritized.
Go and sort this
Nice.
for that. We're
But again,
talking,
that practical application, I would never think of that. That's
yeah,
great.
and I think this is where when you sort of take away the stigma of saying I don't know how to do something, you end up getting different people being creative, saying, well, this is what would solve my problem. We've got another, we did a system for some people who wanted to say, we've got a multicultural workforce and
Mm.
I want to have something a bit like WhatsApp, but I want my different members of the workforce to talk into a microphone in whatever language they want, Turkish. It will
Yeah.
then be translated into the language of the person it's being sent to, and so their Spanish supervisor will get their text in Spanish, and
Wow.
when they type their response in Spanish, it will then be translated into Turkish for the end user. So you suddenly start to sort of change the too much development has been targeted at sort of the office worker and
Yeah.
not maybe the people who are out and about.
No, that's
Right.
really cool. Thank you.
So
So, and it's all popped up now. Go on.
so this click on here. Oops, the lights have just gone out in the room I'm sitting in. I'm just going to come down to here, upload an image. And while that's uploading, I realize I'm just going to switch the lights on a second. So,
Intimate lighting in his room. And I did not realize how easy this was. I think that's been the education piece for me in this webinar, that there's some great tools. And as last time, I'll have a look at the little beginners web, sort of all of these software tools that Mark's talking about. We'll have little intro videos. So I'll go and find some of those after this call as well to give people that getting started piece.
what I'll do is I'll send you some links to some very good YouTube series which have
Perfect.
sort of 10 YouTube videos that will take you through the basics of how to build something.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. So what I want to do now is just go back to the original setup. And reload this page. You learn to be patient with Flutterflow. It's one of the downsides of it compiling itself into proper programs. Things take longer.
This reminds me of how the internet used to work. You go on
Yeah,
a few seconds. We're so impatient, aren't we?
yeah, yeah. Right, you're gonna have to take my word for it, but I built this. I built this in about an hour, and it's just a list of photographs and titles. I can press a button at the bottom, and I can load either I'm doing it from my desktop, so I don't have a camera, but either camera or desktop, I can load a picture. I can give it a title, so you can see the mole has updated in the middle. And when I click save, if it's all behaving itself, it should be writing that data to the database. And should update itself here. There's the mole record at the top, and if I click on mole, you can see that the AI says the image shows a mole in close-up, partially emerging from the soil, holding an earthworm in its mouth. The mole's dark fur is visible, dum-de-dum-de-dum. So that's basically saying I've taken a photograph, uploaded it, stored it. It could be a research project, it could be capturing data in the field, and I've just asked OpenAI to tell me what's in that photograph. And obviously, I haven't trained anything or done anything special, but you could be I could be asking far more complicated questions and just saying, what is this photograph about?
We have another question.
Yeah.
With a compliment, excellent presentation. It's true, very insightful.
Thank you.
My question is, could you develop a personalized social media app for colleagues or a specific type of project? How much could this diverge from existing platforms?
I mean, it is probably exactly the sort of apps that this is very good at doing. And talking about the language translation, I think the idea of chat is replacing email.
Yeah.
And so if I want to ask HR about have my expenses being processed this month, yes, I can send to an email to HR at wherever. But if I send it as an issue with a chat attached to that, and anyone in HR can reply to that, and when that issue is closed, the chat just disappears, or is archived, and suddenly you move out of an environment where 75 people are on a group chat and only being bombarded by 3 or 4 people who dominate it. So yes,
And we're
and
using that. I mean, I use Slack for that in a few of the
mhm,
projects I work on. Teams has a way of doing
yeah,
that, but it's a bit
yeah,
retrofitting. I think, as you say, we've all got used to WhatsApp as a communication channel,
mhm,
which is not suitable for this sort
yeah,
of conversation at
yeah.
all.
And it's uncontrolled.
Yes.
The IT department doesn't have
It's so
oversight
loud
of
and
it.
it's not
Yeah,
intelligent.
yeah,
As you're
yeah,
saying, if it's got workflows, it means there's still a trail,
yeah, yeah.
but without, anything that gets us off email makes me happy.
Yeah. So, you could, in a university context, you could be sending faults, take photograph of a fault, a leaking toilet, to facilities. The facilities would know exactly where that toilet is because it's got the coordinates off your phone. It knows who's reported it, so it can keep you in the loop of when they're going to repair it, because obviously you've cared enough to report it. And the repair person who's sent out to do it can be picked from someone who's close to that spot rather than picking someone from the wrong part of the university to go and fix it. You can be more efficient. So
Yeah.
those are the sorts of applications I think this is very good at. And it's the even the basic use of AI is very, very powerful in something like this.
Yeah.
So in the last 5 minutes, I'm just going to jump straight into, so that's Flutterflow. We'll jump now into Superbase. I'm not going to really give you a demo. I'm just going to show you what Superbase looks like. Here are all my tables. The capture table is the one we've just been working on. So here's the mole. Here's the photograph of the mole, or the URL. So if I come up here and just paste that one in there, there's the mole picture. And here is the description that's been returned by build ship and stored into a database. Superbase can actually trigger processes in build ship in the same way that Flutterflow can. So every time I write a record to a table, a background process can happen. And I'm just going to, this is a bit of the demo I am potentially, so the the process you've just seen is generated using this backend process. We have a URL, so HTTPS. This is the URL which I've called /image, and I pass into that URL a question. I ask a question, and in the body of that, I'm passing an image URL. And this basically returns, this does an OpenAI analysis of that URL. I'm not sure. So if I go here, this is just a test environment image URL, and I paste in and I hope, if this works correctly, the image of the all is actually being processed now in real time. We can see this node has been highlighted, and then we give it a name description and return it, and here we have the image. Shows a navy blue. Oh, I've got a different image. I don't know what. Oh, I've got a default image in there. It doesn't matter. But this is how you test a workflow. While I was waiting for this session today, I built another workflow which was called Just Ask Me. And in Ask Me, I basically said I'm going to pass in a little question, and the question is going to be called question. It's very original, and I'm going to ask OpenAI to ask that question. So if I now ship this workflow, I can copy this workflow, and now from anywhere I am, if I just paste that workflow into a browser and I just say question, why is the sky blue? That's one I did earlier. It then will just return into my browser why the sky is blue, something to do with Rayleigh scattering. But just to finish off the demo part of this, I can then come back into Flutterflow and I can go into my APIs and I can have my image flow defined within my API. I can create a new sort of API within Flutterflow, fill out this form with the various bits of data that BuildShip give me. It even lets me test it. So if I want to test it, and I can then use that API from within my program. Well, I've got 2 or 3 minutes left. I just want to jump back into the presentation. I just wanted to show you one example of an application that's been developed over the last probably 3 or 4 months by a group of recent graduates from the university. None of the graduates, well, Exeter and UWE, the graduates, there's one lawyer in the team, and there are 2 business administration students. And they've built an app using low-code techniques where you can record yourself. It's a 2-minute recording of yourself. It will create a AI avatar of you. You can then combine that with a script to create marketing landing pages, which basically means as part of account-based marketing, they're able to provide targeted messages to their marketplace and then track the responses and returns from those applications. And they told me this morning that one of their first pilot customers created an avatar of himself, recorded a video, and by record a video, you type in the text of what you want it to say, and the avatar generates the video for you. He sent out 30,000 newsletters, 15,000 of them with the avatar and 15,000 without, and they doubled their response rate with the ones that had the avatar in it. And the clever thing about the avatars, it means you can, even if I can only speak English, I can produce an avatar of my spouse speaking Chinese, Spanish, whatever language I want. I can use the equivalent of mail merge to put the name of the person I want to talk in. Now, I'm not sure this will work on here. Tell me if you can you hear the sound on this?
No.
This is actually a computer generated video. This is not a video. So you'll have to take my word for it. The sound is perfectly synced to his lips. And they've done all this using low code techniques.
Wow, it's kind of like I want to have a go, but I'm also slightly, I think that must be slightly weird hearing yourself talking.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, I'm quite open with these guys. Their application is a little bit Marmite. You know, would I want an avatar that could say whatever someone put a script into it to say? I'd want to make sure I'm in control of the script. Let's put it
Well,
that way.
it tunes into the whole deep fake
Yeah, it does.
narrative, which Jack Dorsey's very worried about, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's the
Um,
yeah,
but
as we all are.
they're trying, you know, people, their target customers are people looking, a big American law firm wants to use it to try and increase people coming back to conferences they've put on, so they already know their audience. But yeah, I mean, there are issues in this
There
sort of
will
thing.
always be someone who sees the dark side of any technology.
Yeah.
That is the human mind.
And actually, the startups that are using AI most effectively are those using it for the toolkits, little bits, you know, translating a Turkish spoken word into Spanish text or whatever,
Yep.
and it's using it as part of a bigger application.
I saw an AI that got investment this week who just do bid writing.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, my life would like that. And he said,
yeah,
if you want to create a funky picture of a dragon, eating a chocolate bar, that's not what their platform will be. It'll
yeah,
be to help people who write bids. And
yeah,
so I think people are getting ultra niche. There are the silly ones, which we talked a
yeah.
little bit about chat last week, but I think that ultra niche focused solution is where this is all going.
Yeah, it's, you know, and it's great for sort of whether you're analyzing graffiti or, you know, and what's I mean, the where this is developing, and it's, you know, we're still in the foothills, to be honest, is with Flutterflow, Superbase, and BuildShip. You can now get BuildShip to talk to your databases and use AI to analyze your. So if you were building big data sets, OpenAI is brilliant at analyzing big data sets, and, you know, being able to query a data set just using the equivalent of, you know, text language. You know, what was the last time this machine was maintained by John Smith or whatever,
Yeah.
and suddenly it will find the data for you. So and I just think that these low code tools will open up. There'll be more interesting opportunities for improved, whether it's research or productivity or whatever, because people who are at the rock face know what the problems are, and it might actually help them sort of solve those problems.
Like the ones you outlined, there's a real inefficiency because there hasn't been a solution before.
Hmm.
So it sounds very simple, the graffiti one, but what a brilliant idea. And there's so
Hmm.
many more of those, isn't there, when you start
Yeah,
thinking about it.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop recording, but first of all, I'm going to say for those of you still on the call, thank you all for making it through. I know we've clicked over the half past. I hope I'll see you all next week for our final one, talking about podcasting. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how and why and where to start and all that great planning, but the technology as well. And basically at Podcasting 101, then we're going to hear from an amazing academic project who's got a really powerful podcast, details of which I'll put in the outline for the event so you can have a little listen before you come and join us. But please do come along to the final one of the series. Cool, we are all done.